Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, a landmark vote. The Senate passes the Respect for Marriage Act, protecting the right for same-sex and interracial marriages. We'll show you what's next for the bill and the compromise made to win over more Republican votes in the Senate. Guilty, the founder of a far-right group is convicted of seditious conspiracy for his role in the January 6th Capitol riots. The other guilty verdicts members of the Oath Keepers received and what these sentences mean for others charged in the attack on the Capitol. Wicked weather. Severe storms ripped through parts of the South overnight. In Mississippi, trees fell on homes, roofs damaged, and power lines were knocked down. And in Louisiana, a possible tornado caused damage there. We have a look at the impact the storms had as people are waking up this morning. Plus, meteorologist Michelle Grossman is tracking where the system is heading next. Also this morning, breakthrough. New research is providing hope for people battling Alzheimer's, a drug to possibly treat the disease by slowing cognitive decline in patients. We'll explain what this means for patients and why doctors say this drug is different. Really a major breakthrough that would mean so much to so many families.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we should know, you might not be able to tell at home, but we are in a new studio starting this morning.
Yes,
so we are excited to welcome you into our new home.
Thanks for being with us on this Wednesday morning. We begin with a historic vote in the Senate as Congress faces a busy week in Washington.
Yeah, the Senate passed a bill that would protect same-sex marriages under federal law. Now it goes back to the House for a vote there before President Biden can make it official with his signature. Earlier yesterday, the president hosted a meeting at the White House with Democratic and GOP congressional leaders. He discussed his priorities before the start of the next Congress, and he emphasized the need for both sides to work together going forward.
We're going to work together to fund, I hope, work together to fund the government, COVID, and the war in Ukraine, all controversial and consequential issues. And we're going to find other areas of common ground, I hope, because the American people want us to work together.
Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee and Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. Good morning to both of you. So, Ryan, let's begin with you there on Capitol Hill. One of these top priorities for the president was codifying same-sex marriage. The Senate yesterday passed a bill that would give federal protection to same-sex couples. The bill received bipartisan support, which is what it needed to pass. So explain to us the importance of this and what's next now for this legislation as it makes its way through Congress to the president.
Well, Joe, it's really remarkable when you think about how far the debate over same-sex marriage has come in this country, that you would get such a strong bipartisan vote in support of protecting same-sex marriage across the country like we saw here in the United States Senate yesterday. Now, this doesn't go as far as completely codifying the Supreme Court ruling that protects same-sex marriage across the country, but what it does do is it holds in place that the marriages that currently exist will be protected under the law if for some reason that Supreme Court decision is overturned. And that really was born out of the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, and concerns by Democrats that could be the next step in the Supreme Court. So that's why Democrats found it to be important. Now, there are some protections in there for religious freedom, which Republicans were concerned about. Those were the concessions that were made to get it over the finish line. This bill will now go back to the House, where it's expected to swiftly pass, and then will go to President Biden to be signed into law. Joe, this could happen quickly. This could be the law of the land by as soon as the end of this week.
All right. So, Carol, let's talk about another issue on the president's plate. President Biden is calling on lawmakers to step in to help avert a potential rail workers strike before the holidays. We know the House is planning to vote on ratifying a deal. What are some of the challenges in getting Congress to try and block a strike? What's at stake here?
Well, Joe, the challenges are really the same challenge that has been facing the negotiators, the reason why this is being kicked to Congress, and that is paid sick leave. So the House will vote on this and then also vote on paid sick leave, and then this shifts over to the Senate, and the challenge there is the same. There's senators, including Senator Bernie Sanders, who's saying that he wants a vote on paid sick leave, which is not included in this deal that Congress is trying to codify. And so that's going to be the issue in terms of getting something passed through Congress. But this is something that the president has said is very important, that needs to be done. And he reiterated that yesterday at that meeting with congressional leaders. Take a listen.
There's a lot to do, including resolving the train strike, what we're doing now, and Congress, I think, has to act to prevent it. It's not an easy call, but I think we have to do it. The economy's at risk.
And you heard there some reluctance in the president's voice saying this is not an easy call, and that is because what the White House and the president had to do here is weigh the risk of upsetting the president's core base of unions, which is he's been a long supporter of unions, versus the risk to the economy. The estimates say the U.S. economy could drain some $2 billion a day. And so the broader impact here is what outweighed the president's loyalty to unions, and he reversed course here and said that Congress needs to act.
Lot at stake here. Ryan, I don't need to tell you, today is a big day on Capitol Hill. House Democrats are holding those leadership elections. What should we know about that, and who's going to be officially taking on new roles here?
Joe, frankly, it's going to be a historic day in Washington. For the first time, any congressional leadership party in Congress, I should say, will be led by an African-American for the first time. And that's when Hakeem Jeffries is expected to be unanimously elected as the leader of the Democratic minority in the next Congress. He'll be joined by Catherine Clark, who will be the minority whip, and Pete Aguilar, who will be the conference chair from California. This represents a generational change for Democrats in Washington. This new crop of leaders, these three new leaders, are 30 years younger than the group that they're going to replace in Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and James Clyburn. Now, Clyburn of South Carolina is going to hang around and still be part of the leadership team, but he is going to now take the fourth position. So you have these three young, emerging Democratic leaders who are now going to be responsible for guiding the party through this next Congress. And it's going to be an important job because the margins in the House are going to be tight. Could be a difference of 4, maybe 5 seats. So it's going to be Hakeem Jeffries' job to replicate the job that Nancy Pelosi did in keeping everyone together to stand strong on the things that Democrats care about. Of course, Pelosi isn't going anywhere. She's going to hold on to her seat in Congress. She was dubbed yesterday with the ceremonial title of Speaker Emerita. So they are going to have her around to lean on her counsel. But this new crop are going to be the ones in charge, and they certainly have a big job ahead of them.
And Carol, on the other side of the aisle, you got Kevin McCarthy. He's looking to become the next Speaker of the House when the GOP takes control in the new term. As we mentioned, he was in that meeting with President Biden at the White House yesterday. So what can we expect of his relationship with the president going forward?
Well, look, Joe, it's not a warm relationship by any stretch. These are two leaders who do not see eye to eye on a number of policies, but also Kevin McCarthy is somebody who, according to the president, is part of the MAGA Republican problem that he sees as a threat to the U.S. and its democracy. So there's a lot of contentiousness here. Kevin McCarthy has said he's going to lead investigations into the Biden administration, including into the president's son, Hunter Biden. That's personal for the president, obviously. And so I think the relationship is going to be whatever it needs to be in terms of what are the must-dos that have to get done. How does the president engage with Kevin McCarthy if he does become Speaker, and to get those things done? Otherwise, there isn't going to be much of a relationship there. And we've seen this before. It's not like Nancy Pelosi had a close relationship with former President Trump and that dynamic. And so they're just going to try to, from the White House's perspective, get done what needs to be done. Very low expectations here, Joe.
A lot to cover in Washington. Carol and Ryan, thank you both.
And now to new fallout this morning from the January 6th attack on the Capitol. 2 members of the far-right militia group, the Oath Keepers, have been convicted of seditious conspiracy. Stuart Rhodes, the group's founder, and Kelly Meggs were both found guilty of the Civil War-era statute. 3 other members of the group who were on trial alongside them were acquitted on that specific seditious conspiracy charge. But all 5 defendants were found guilty of obstruction of an official proceeding and aiding and abetting for their actions on January 6th. For more, we're joined by NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney. And Ken, good to see you this morning. Thanks for being here. So put this into context first. I mean, this seditious conspiracy, what does that specific charge mean? And what kind of sentence does it mean they're looking at?
Good morning, Savannah. Well, this was a landmark, if partial, victory for the Department of Justice. It's the first time in 20 trials that a jury has found that what happened on January 6th was the product of an organized conspiracy, and in particular, this seditious conspiracy charge, it carries a penalty of up to 20 years in prison, as does the obstruction of an official proceeding charge. So these defendants are facing, all of them, facing a lot of years in prison. And seditious conspiracy specifically, the DOJ hasn't won a conviction on that since 1995. It's defined as plotting to use force to overthrow or thwart the will of the U.S. government. It's a Civil War era charge that was used against Confederates, but a very very, very significant finding by a jury in this case, Savannah.
Could this impact the Justice Department's other investigations that are going on? A lot obviously happening looking into January 6th, and including their investigation into former President Trump. Any crossover?
Well, it certainly vindicates their approach, and there are 2 other major trials upcoming, including of a group of Proud Boys, a separate far-right group, on seditious conspiracy charges. So it bolsters the approach that the DOJ has been taking and shows that what happened on January 6th was not a political protest or a rowdy riot. There was a product of a conspiracy, according to the jury. There were no specific links established at this trial to former President Trump, although Stuart Rhodes, the lead defendant, did try to get in touch with the former president in the months leading up to the January 6th riot, and he told the jury that he believed that his militia could be called by Trump if Trump invoked the Insurrection Act to stay in power. But, you know, what this also does is provide a set of defendants who have an incentive to cooperate with the government, Savannah, so they may learn more information.
Also, Ken, in addition to other investigations, there are these other trials. The Department of Justice is about to try other militia group members on similar conspiracy charges. How will this impact that? Will prosecutors be changing anything, looking out for anything after this trial and these verdicts?
Well, they didn't win 100% of the charges, so of course they will look at the trial strategy and see where they fell short on some of these defendants. But overall, it's a vindication of their approach. And look, there have been 900 criminal cases in this Capitol riot situation, and you know the DOJ is still chugging along. It remains a question of whether they will actually be able to prosecute everybody who breached the Capitol that day. But in terms of these major cases involving far-right militia groups alleged to have conspired, the DOJ is throwing a lot of resources at this problem, Savannah.
All right, Ken, as always, thanks for your reporting.
Now to the latest on the midterm elections. More than 3 weeks have passed since people cast their ballots, but votes are still being certified in parts of the country. And in one Pennsylvania county, they are deadlocked on certifying the results of the election. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray. Mark, good morning to you. So we are talking about Luzerne County. It was one of those areas in Pennsylvania that we were closely watching on election night. Explain what's happening there now. Why is there a deadlock?
Yeah, Joe, and Luzerne County is essentially Wilkes-Barre, and you are right. It is one of the swingiest parts of the battleground state of Pennsylvania. And what ended up occurring was that 5 members of the county elections board failed to certify the election, at least as of Monday. You had 2 Democrats voting to certify the results. You had 2 Republicans against, and 1 Democrat who ended up abstaining. And an issue was the fact in Luzerne County there was a paper supply shortage, and there were arguments from folks that the election wasn't conducted freely and fairly, even though polling places were extended by 2 hours to make up for that supply shortage.
So for those who are against the certification of the election in that county, I mean, what's their argument? Do they believe the results would have been different if the poll closing time wasn't pushed back because of the paper ballot issue on Election Day?
Yeah, Joe, one of the Republicans who voted against certifying the election said the contest was not conducted freely and fairly, citing that paper supply shortage. But as you ended up mentioning, when you look at the results of the election, John Fetterman won the Senate contest by 6 percentage points. Josh Shapiro, the Democrat, ended up winning by 15 points. And you just look at the overall results, and it's not necessarily sure that any kind of supply shortage ended up affecting any of the results where Democrats were the big winners across the state.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's my big question. What kind of impact, if at all, will this have on the candidates who won their respective races? I mean, if they don't certify in this county, any reason to believe that those people wouldn't be able to take office?
Yeah, Joe, but the expectation is that the certification will end up occurring. I mentioned that one Democrat who voted to abstain. That Democrat has since told local media news outlets that he will vote to certify, which would end up giving a 3-2 majority for certification.
All right, Mark Murray on top of this for us. Mark, thank you so much. Now to those severe storms in the south. Right now, 2 million people are under a severe weather threat with dozens of reports of tornadoes so far.
Yeah, take a look at some of the damage in Alabama that we're seeing on our screens here. This is where trees fell on homes, roofs were damaged, and power lines were knocked down from that severe weather. We have team coverage this morning. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is in studio with us, tracking where the system is now and where it's headed next. But we're going to begin with NBC News correspondent Sam Brock live on the ground in Mississippi with more on what happened overnight. We could see he's right there with what looks like a pretty large tree that was downed. Hey, Sam, good morning.
Yeah, the visual is pretty clear. Savannah, Joe, good morning. And these storms blanketed a large chunk of the South. The majority of them were reported so far in Mississippi. We are in Steens, Mississippi, where you'll see things like this. Isolated examples of power. A tree snapped in half. You have splinters on one side jutting out. Then the rest of the tree that is sitting on top of a small boat. As I walk around this property, you'll see just mounds of debris everywhere as well. And what appears to be a power pole that punctured the interior of this house. And yet, an event that had the potential, guys, to be historically dangerous and deadly turned out not to be, as many people still were fearing for their safety.
In the middle of the night, few things could be scarier than a black funnel cloud filling the sky against the sound of sirens. This tornado in Bassfield, Mississippi, one of more than 20 sightings from Louisiana to Alabama to Mississippi. Storms bringing in massive wind gusts to the region. Lowndes County was one of the hardest hit areas. Roofs ripped right off homes and the local fire station destroyed.
We'll know more in the daylight, but from what it looks like right now, this building will have to come down and we'll have to start the rebuild process.
Power companies working through the night to clear downed lines and trees. Fortunately, no serious injuries reported. In the town of Steens, winds ripping the steeple right off this church. While in Caldwell Parish, Louisiana, the sheriff confirms 2 people were injured from a tornado that damaged several homes. These types of nocturnal tornadoes are historically 2.5 times more deadly than those that happen during the day. So far, though, no reports of any fatalities. Even as supercells flashed for hours and lightning flickered with violent frequency. Mother Nature's wrath on full display, keeping large sections of the Tennessee and Mississippi valleys on edge, but largely unharmed.
And guys, these communities here in the South and certainly in Mississippi, where I am, central Mississippi, are sparse, but they are highly populated with these kinds of homes, trailers. And it's interesting to note, you have about 6% of the U.S. housing stock made up of mobile homes, but 54% of the deaths that occur during tornadoes are tied to mobile homes. So greater elevated risks here. So far, as we mentioned, no reports of any fatalities. Let me send it back to you.
A little bit of good news there. All right, Sam Brock, thank you so much. Stay safe.
Yeah, and the severe weather threats continue for part of Mississippi this morning.
Yeah, meteorologist Michelle Grossman is here to track that for us and the rest of your Morning News Now weather. Hey, Michelle.
Hey there, guys. Great to see you. Yeah, and that severe weather started yesterday. The Severe Prediction Center predicted it and unfortunately did come to fruition. So we watched those storms yesterday afternoon into the evening, overnight hours, still watching those storms. We're talking about strong to severe thunderstorms, also tornadoes, heavy rain, really large hail up to softball size, even baseball size. This is what it looks like right now. We're watching that cold front move off to the east, so we still do have the chance for seeing strong to severe storms over the next several hours. By this afternoon, we're going to see it start to transition to just plain rain, but still could see some flooding rain and some really heavy rain in spots. Still seeing that lightning. We had a lot of lightning yesterday. Still seeing it this morning. At least the sun has come up. And where we see those storms, we could see pretty strong storms. So winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour, a few isolated tornadoes, a risk of hail is low, but there's still a risk. And we're looking at heavy rain that could lead to some flash flooding as well. So we're going to continue to watch this cold front move off to the east. That means we're going to see some heavy rain in the northeast, soaking rain. And we're looking at strong winds this afternoon as the front goes by. We're going to see those winds really gusting up to 50, 60 miles per hour. You could see in a lot of spots in the northeast, also looking at the chance for some power outages with downed trees, power lines, and also some airport delays as we go throughout this afternoon. And then we're looking at snowfall. So once we see that area of low pressure kind of spin those winds, those really cold winds and fast winds over the warm lake waters. We're going to see lake effect snow. Remember Watertown just last week saw a lot of snow. We're going to see that once again south of Watertown, south of Buffalo, south of Erie. We could see up to 6, 8, even 10 inches of snow in some spots. Rainfall will be heavy at times from the southeast, where you see the reds, the yellows, the oranges. That's where we're anticipating some heavy rain. So portions of the Gulf Coast, the southeast, into the northeast. That includes Maine, upstate New York, and the interior portions of Pennsylvania. So this is going to be a big story as we go throughout the afternoon. Soaking rains. You need the umbrella. And what does that mean for tonight? Christmas in Rockefeller Center. The big question, right? Fun night in New York City. The good news, it looks like that front's going to move quickly. So it's moving quicker than we thought. Hopefully it'll be out of here. And we're looking at partly cloudy skies by 8 o'clock. Winds gusting up to 40 miles per hour. It's going to be chilly, 48 degrees. So you factor in those winds, it's going to feel chillier than that. So here comes a cold. We've been talking about this cold front for days and days, and it's really a temperature divide. So back behind this cold front, we're looking at temperatures frigid, 23 degrees today in Minneapolis. Joe, that's 10 degrees below normal for this time of year. Freezing in Chicago, right below freezing in Omaha, 41 in St. Louis. But notice those temperatures out ahead of the front. This was the problem. Cold air clashing with that warm, humid air. So we're going to be warm today. D.C., 62 degrees. That's 8 degrees above normal for this time of year. 64 in Raleigh. That cold front moves through, and look at the difference tomorrow. You need the coat, you need the layers, because we're into the 30s in Buffalo, Detroit, also Cincinnati. 50 degrees in Raleigh, 7 degrees below normal for this time of year. And D.C., you're just going to be in the 40s as well. Then as we go throughout Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're sort of mixed. Minneapolis kind of stands out to me because on Saturday, just 20 degrees, up to 35 on Sunday. At least that's going to feel a little bit better in the 30s in Chicago on Saturday and Sunday. Then as we look towards the Northeast, we're looking at a nice day on Saturday. It'll be breezy, but it'll be dry with temperatures in the 50s, maybe a little light showers in the morning, 48 as we go throughout Sunday. So the forecast for today, we're talking about the lake effect snow, the rain and wind throughout the Northeast into the Southeast, severe storms over the next couple of hours before it's just plain rain. And then through the middle of the country, we finally cleared it out. It's going to be cold, but it'll be dry with lots of sunshine from the northern plains, the central plains, into the southern plains, and then the Pacific Northwest. We're looking at some heavy snow, guys, there. We could see feet of snow in the Cascades and the Sierra as well.
Okay, so 40-mile-an-hour winds for the rock center trees. We're going to find out, does a spruce sway in the wind?
Right, exactly. Are the ornaments going to stay?
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Will the owl come out? Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah, I think we're both planning on being out there. So
are you?
Yeah.
Bundle up.
Oh, I can't wait to see the pictures.
We'll see, I guess.
Thanks,
All
Michelle.
right, Michelle. Thank you very much. Sure. Coming up on Morning News Now, a major development in the Jackson, Mississippi water crisis. The Justice Department is now suing the city, saying it failed to provide clean drinking water. What this means for people living there and the ongoing water issues they're facing.
Plus, taking action, football star Brett Favre is trying to get his name off a lawsuit accusing him of receiving money taken from a welfare assistance program. The latest on that legal fight next.
We have new updates on that water crisis that forced Jackson, Mississippi residents to boil their water for weeks. The Department of Justice has filed a new complaint against local officials on behalf of the EPA, alleging the city failed to protect residents. NBC News Washington correspondent Yamiche Alcindor has the latest.
The Justice Department taking action on the water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. In a statement, Attorney General Merrick Garland saying, in part, we will continue to prioritize cases in the communities most burdened by environmental harm. Jackson has been plagued by a series of drinking water crises and service outages in recent years, including the city's main water treatment plant failing after heavy rain. In a separate action, the department also announced it filed a proposed order that would appoint a third party to stabilize Jackson's water system. A court granted that order late today. That party would operate the system, take charge of billing customers, and make needed improvements. The DOJ says the city and the Mississippi State Health Department have both signed the order and agreed to its terms. The city has repeatedly said it intends to cooperate. Longtime Jackson resident Brooke Floyd says her family has been boiling water for years.
What do you want to see happen now that the DOJ is involved here?
I want our water to be fixed. I want my children to be able to turn on the faucet and brush their teeth.
Kristen Clark, the head of the DOJ Civil Rights Division, spoke in September about Jackson's water crisis.
We as a nation have a duty to stand up for our nation's most vulnerable. And it is not lost on us that we're talking about a community that is home to a disproportionate number of low-income Black people in Mississippi.
Our thanks to Yamiche for that report. Now, this is the latest in a string of recent DOJ investigations looking into environmental issues like failing sewage systems in Alabama and illegal dumping in Texas. And one Jackson resident told NBC that it's time for the city, state, and federal government to step up.
All right, moving on. Football icon Brett Favre is asking to be removed from the Mississippi welfare fraud lawsuit.
Yeah, lawyers for Favre said the Mississippi Department of Human Services, quote, groundlessly and irresponsibly seeks to blame Favre for its own grossly improper and unlawful handling of welfare funds.
Mississippi DHS says more than $20 million was wrongfully taken from the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families anti-poverty program. Favre received $1.1 million, but maintains he did not know where that money came from. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas joins us now here on set for more. Danny, good to have you here in our news studio. So let's talk about this. The basics. Does Brett Favre have a case to get his name removed from this lawsuit, even though he did receive some money?
First of all, I'm saying Favre. It says Favre on the paper.
Right?
I am not doing this Emperor's New Clothes nonsense anymore.
Packers fans, send your emails.
I am none of those fans, but it says Favre. Now, that being said, a motion to dismiss at this stage has a very heavy burden. As long as the four corners of the complaint make out any kind of claim, it's going to be allowed to survive. The court will assume everything in the complaint is true. But I gotta say, Favre has a pretty good argument here because the Mississippi Department of Human Services essentially says, hey, we were exclusively responsible for this $94 million, and it was mismanaged. So we're going after Brett Favre. Brett Favre says, hey, you know who you should sue? Yourself. You were responsible for this. And in your complaint, he says that you didn't even allege that I had knowledge that the funds were ill-gotten. There's no allegation that I knew that when I was being paid this money, that I knew it was being misappropriated. Favre says, go after the real bad guys, the people who have been convicted, or sue yourself.
All right, so he's actually already paid about $1 million, over $1 million back to this Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Fund. What more are they trying to go after here?
Yeah, Favre is making that argument. He's saying you can't come after me to repay money that I've already repaid. And you're not denying that I've repaid the money. Now, the complaint alleges other causes of action, but it all comes back to Favre's allegation. And remember, at this stage, all they do is look at the complaint. And if it's true that the complaint doesn't even allege that Favre had knowledge, then maybe Favre has a point. Because after all, the mere fact that he may have known some of the bad guys, that he may have been a recipient of this money, that may not be a very strong civil complaint if Favre had no idea or no reason to know that the money he was accepting was somehow ill-gotten or fraudulently obtained by somebody else.
You mentioned that they already went after other people. 6 people were arrested in connection to this case. 5 of them have already pleaded guilty to state charges. Favre wasn't one of them, so why was he not criminally charged?
Because, for whatever reason, the state didn't believe they had it. They had enough evidence to go after the other people who were actually, some of them were in government, and they must have had evidence that that satisfied the proof beyond a reasonable doubt standard. It's very telling that they didn't charge Favre with the same crimes. Now, that doesn't mean, given our burdens of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the civil standard of preponderance of evidence is much, much lower. So just because someone is acquitted doesn't mean they can't be sued. Classic example, O.J. Simpson, acquitted of murder, sued and found liable civilly for the deaths of his victims. So that's a good illustration of the difference between the burden. But just because someone isn't charged doesn't mean you can't sue them.
All right, Danny Savalas, thanks for breaking it down. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Danny. And now let's get you some international headlines. China is cracking down on those massive protests across the country over the government's strict COVID rules.
NBC foreign correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us from Rome with this and other world headlines. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Yes, following the largest anti-government demonstrations seen in decades in China, the ruling Communist Party has issued a statement in which it vows to crack down on what they call the infiltration and sabotage activities by hostile forces. Hundreds of people in several Chinese cities took to the streets in recent days to demonstrate against the strict COVID-19 restrictions. The protests were met by a massive show of force by security services. Let's move to Pakistan, where a suicide bomber blew himself up near a truck carrying police officers, killing 1 officer, 2 civilians, and wounding dozens of other people. The truck was taking the police officers to a vaccination center against polio near the city of Quetta. A senior police officer said the blast was so powerful it toppled the truck into a ravine. And let's go to Egypt, where thousands of people have signed the petition for the return of the Rosetta Stone, one of the most visited and precious pieces held in the British Museum in London. The granite slab was taken from Egypt by or during the British Empire in 1801, and its hieroglyphics were deciphered 20 years later. Now, more than 4,000 Egyptians are demanding its return, saying the stone was seized illegally and constitutes a spoil of war, guys.
All right, interesting. Claudio, thank you so much.
Thank you. Coming up, holiday get-togethers are in full swing, and for some, that can be tough.
Up next, the impact those parties can have on people struggling with alcohol and how you can make them feel more comfortable when there are drinks around. Time now for your weekly checkup, including a closer look at cannabis use among pregnant women.
Plus, how obesity among children might be causing permanent damage to their brains. NBC News medical contributor and our friend Dr. Velveeta Patel joins us now for more on these headlines. Doctor, always great to have you with us. So actually, before we get into this regular roundup, we want to talk about something pretty big here, a potential breakthrough in tackling the most common form of dementia. It's a new drug being praised for its ability to slow the effects of Alzheimer's on the brain. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, Joe and Savannah, this is breaking news published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and it signals that we're getting ever closer, but probably not close enough for patients' comfort. This is a new medication that showed a significant decrease in dementia. It did have some side effects, but it was something that had positive results in the trial to be significant enough, not just for Alzheimer's dementia, possibly for other dementias. There is some important kind of developments in anatomy that we see in patients with dementia, and a plaque that can develop around the nervous system that shows that people might be more at risk or have significant dementia. And this particular drug was developed, lecanemab, and it was a partnership between the company Biogen and Eisai Pharmaceuticals. So this was a kind of a partnership of two very well-known CNS drug manufacturers. Here's the short kind of version, though. Savannah and Joe, we're not going to necessarily see this result right away for dementia patients today, but hopefully we'll have signals for the future and some solutions in the end.
We'll take all the promising news we can get on that front.
Yeah, we can.
Dr. Patel, let's turn to a Kaiser Permanente study which found prenatal cannabis use was the highest in areas where cannabis was on sale in retail stores. It's probably not super surprising, but what else did it find, and what do you recommend?
Right. Yeah. So look, I have a lot of patients that are thinking about getting pregnant or in the early stages of their pregnancy that during the pandemic, Joe, they were anxious. There was a lot of nausea symptoms that some people had pointed to medical cannabis, alcohol, to be a kind of a relief. So there are many patients that had not necessarily told their doctors because if it's legal, they didn't really think it was something to talk about. Well, this is one of the first studies that shows in a state like California, where cannabis was legal both before the pandemic and through the pandemic, that they saw increases in the use of cannabis, no surprise, during the pandemic, from about 6.8% to 8.2% of pregnant women using medical cannabis. However, what they saw is that if you lived within 10 minutes of a retail storefront that sold cannabis, that you had a much higher likelihood of using cannabis, that there were absolute increases in your use of cannabis. This is concerning, not only because we don't have enough to understand the effects of prenatal cannabis on not just the pregnancy, but early signs indicate that even mild use could signal longer-term effects in the fetus and in the baby. So this is something that really just points to the doctor's orders that I have. Legal does not necessarily mean safer, and that's just something to think about when planning to conceive or pregnant. Number two, do not be scared to tell your doctor. There can still be some shame around what women are using when they're pregnant, when they're dealing with symptoms. Disclose everything as early as possible or when you're thinking about getting pregnant. And then here's the bottom line. The right amount is 0 in pregnancy. Until we know more and understand, the safest thing to do is to avoid using cannabis during pregnancy.
All right, some really important reminders there. All right, let's get to that other one that we just mentioned a second ago. Previous research has shown children with obesity tend to do worse at school, but a new study is shining light on why exactly that might happen. What was the biggest takeaway here?
Yeah, so over 5,000 children as part of a longer-term study where they were doing brain scans to look for a number of things. But over 5,000 children that were screened between the ages of 9 and 10 had more changes in their brain imaging. This is changes in the part of your brain that connects the left and right side of your brain changes in kind of how thick or thin the outer part of your brain is when you're looking at it on imaging, all things that are correlated with actually how you function, your longer-term health, how as a child you have emotional reactivity, ability to process information, all related to increased weight. So we've always known that younger children, 1 in 5 in fact, are deemed as obese and overweight, and more than 1 in 5 are overweight. But we have not really had this kind of proof about the effects. And here's what's disturbing, Savannah. We don't know, and we think that this could probably last even beyond, let's say they lose the weight in adolescence or young adulthood. It's not clear if those changes are lasting, and that's troubling. So the doctor's orders here, they're very basic. Move more as a family, limit your screen time, have a healthy eating plan as a family, and don't forget your sleep. Sleep can affect obesity.
We very quickly want to get through one more headline. We know whole grains are important for a healthy diet, but most Americans aren't getting the right amount. There's a debate over what counts as a whole grain. Real quick, what can you explain that we need to know here?
In a study looking at 5 different ways of counting what a whole grain is. It can vary from people being incredibly healthy and on getting their whole grains in, or not so healthy. Bottom line, Americans over the last 2 decades have been eating more whole grains. So here's the truth. Get your whole grains in. What is a whole grain? A lot of things constitute whole grains. It takes to be a whole grain. Things like quinoa, millet, oats, brands are all whole grains. So here's the other bottom line. Don't overthink your grains, Joe. Get them in, and we are as Americans.
I overthink nothing, so that's okay. All right.
I do.
I overthink everything except maybe my grains.
There you go.
All right, Dr. Velveeta Patel, thank you so much. All right, for a lot of us, the holidays are a time of joy and celebration, but this time of year can be tough for people struggling with alcohol or substance abuse.
From family gatherings to parties with friends, even work parties, it might be hard to turn down a drink. And even talking about being sober at parties can be uncomfortable. So what can loved ones do to help? Maeve O'Neill is here to explain how. She is the Executive Vice President of Addiction and Recovery at the All Sober Wellness Company. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, many of us who know someone who's trying to get sober or is sober, but some may not even know that a loved one is struggling with that. So what are some of the signs to look out for? What should we do if we're concerned?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, there's still a lot of stigma around substance use and addiction, like there is with mental health issues. So the best thing to do is sort of just normalize it. If someone in our lives is choosing to be sober this holiday season, maybe just talk about that. And if you are, we're proud of you. We think it's a wonderful thing to be in recovery and seeking sobriety. It's not something to be ashamed of. It might be a challenge to attend events where there's substance use going on. So being prepared to say no or ask for something different or have other options for drinks available.
So how can we show support for a loved one who's trying to cut back on drinking? Having other options sounds like a good one, but what should we know about, making somebody comfortable in that environment?
Well, the most important thing to do is to make it okay. If you know someone's struggling or is choosing sobriety, maybe say, hey, we support you. We think this is a really good choice you're making. There's no shame. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. We're going to be here for you. You may not want to question why they're drinking. Why are you making this choice? We certainly don't want to make fun of them or make jokes or make them feel uncomfortable. Let them know that, we have all these alcohol drinks. We have non-alcohol drinks as well, and they're just as good and just as yummy. They've been really made creatively and fun to drink as well. And I think it's also important to just make it normal, make it no big deal. And if they want to share with people that they're being sober, that's great. And if they don't, they want to keep it quiet, that's okay too.
Non-alcoholic beers have really come a long way and have really grown in popularity.
Oh my gosh, huge
over just
industry.
The last few
Even
years.
just the cocktails in a can too that are non-alcoholic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I also want to ask you, what are some things that you can do if you're the one who's trying to remain sober?
Well, at allsober.com, our online platform and our app, we have some great resources of what to do, how to recognize if your drinking or drug use could be an issue, what to do, how to recognize those problems. Have a plan ahead of time. What am I going to do if there is alcohol or if I feel tempted to have some substance over the holidays? Maybe have a sober friend with you or someone you can call or text or kind of get in touch with. Make sure you have those resources available. Reach out for help. There's lots of many pathways to recovery. Some people go to support group meetings, some people go to therapy or residential or inpatient treatment. So having those resources available is a really good option as well.
Maeve, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Important topic, and happy holidays to you.
Absolutely. Yes, happy holidays. All right, coming up, an interesting one. A Florida woman claims her instant mac and cheese is not so instant.
So now she's taking its maker, Kraft, to court. We're going to show you the message on the packaging that she says is misleading customers. We got that one next.
We're back with a controversial lawsuit over one of those popular easy meals in a cup. A Florida woman is accusing Kraft of falsely advertising the cook time on Velveeta shells and cheese cups.
Yeah, the case might have some people scratching their heads, but some lawyers warn she may have a case. NBC News correspondent Zincle Esamoah takes a closer look at the lawsuit.
This microwavable pasta is at the center of a new lawsuit. Amanda Ramirez from Florida is suing food giant Kraft Heinz, alleging the company misleads customers about just how long it takes to prepare Velveeta's shells and cheese cups. Velveeta shells and cheese packaging says ready in 3.5 minutes, but Ramirez says the claim is false, since microwaving for 3.5 minutes is one of several steps needed. The suit alleges the company is misleading customers, allowing the company to sell more of the product at a higher price. In a statement, representatives for the plaintiffs said in part, "I've gotten a lot of flack about this case, but deceptive advertising is deceptive advertising, and we want corporate America to be straightforward and truthful." In a statement, Kraft Heinz tells NBC they're aware of the, quote, frivolous lawsuit and will strongly defend against the allegations in the complaint.
At first glance, this lawsuit may look ridiculous, but when you look at it more closely, it may be that the defendant here made a misstatement of fact about how long it takes to prepare this product.
One of the attorneys on this suit is Spencer Sheehan, nicknamed the Vanilla Lawyer. He's filed over 400 class action lawsuits against food and beverage companies, over 100 just on vanilla flavoring. This includes household favorites like strawberry Pop-Tarts, Betty Crocker fudge brownie mix, A&W root beer, and even Tostitos hint of lime. The cases are either pending, dismissed, or settled out of court.
This is just a prime example of what we call lawsuit abuse.
Sherman Joyce is president of the American Tort Reform Association.
The evidence is very clear that in these types of consumer class actions, that the consumer gets little, if anything, but that the lawyers do quite well.
Other experts say the law looks out for consumers.
State statutes that punish deceptive trade practices are David and Goliath type statutes. They're designed to look out for the little guy who is harmed by these fraudulent or deceptive trade practices by gigantic companies.
As for Velveeta's mac and cheese, time will tell.
Our thanks to Zincle Esamoah for that report. By the way, in an interview with NPR last year, Spencer Sheehan, that's who she just referred to there as that Vanilla Lawyer, his nickname, was asked about why he's filed so many lawsuits against those big companies.
Well, he said he, quote, never liked it when companies cheated people for small amounts. It would be difficult to recoup. All right, coming up on Morning News now, Team USA's big win over Iran.
We'll take a look at what's next for Team USA as they try to keep their World Cup hopes alive.
We're back with some hauntingly good news for fans of a Broadway classic. The Phantom of the Opera just announced an 8-week extension of the show's run. Phantom is already the longest-running musical on Broadway. Back in September, the show announced it would close after its 35th anniversary in February. Ticket sales spiked immediately after that announcement, but it wasn't until this past week that the show actually had its highest-grossing week ever, reaching $2.2 million. Obviously, the show's producers decided it wasn't time to end the music of the night just yet. I can attest to that. We decided we needed to see it before it closed. Tickets are hard to get and very, very expensive, and now they're extending it. So,
well, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah,
all right.
All right. Now you'll see it.
Exactly. No kidding. Team USA has made it through to the last 16 knockout round of the World Cup with that nail-biting 1-0 victory over Iran.
Yeah, USA had to win in order to progress, setting up a tense finish to the game with a tie having been enough to send Iran through instead. The result means USA advances alongside group winners England. Here's President Biden breaking the news on stage in Michigan yesterday.
U.S. 1, Iran 0, game over. USA, USA. That's a big game, man. When I spoke to the coach and the players, I said, you can do this. They went, they did it. God love them.
NBC News foreign correspondent Megan Fitzgerald joins us now from Doha. Megan, good to see you. Obviously, an exciting time for Team USA. I mean, the pressure was really on here. They ended up delivering in the end. Talk us through some of the big moments of the match. How did the team manage to win?
Guys, this was a stressful game. So within the first half, we saw star player Christian Pulisic score that goal. But then after that, he collided with the Iranian goalie. He's taken off the field, had to go to the hospital for some scans. We'll get into that, of course, later down the line. But now they're playing without their star player. What made it stressful is that the team, in the end, was eventually able to hold the Iranians all the way to the end to get the win. But all it took was for Iran to score one goal to tie the game, and then Iran would be advancing. But that, of course, is not how it went down. Team USA advancing to the next round on Saturday when they will play the Netherlands. Guys.
So you mentioned Christian Pulisic's injury. Everyone is asking right now, what are the chances he's going to be fit for the next game against the Netherlands? How big of a loss would it be for the team if he isn't able to play?
I know, Joe, that's the big question. It would be a major loss for the team. Obviously, he's the one who scored the only goal that allowed Team USA to advance. So this is a big deal. And so they are doing everything they can to get him healthy and up to speed. Like I said, he went to the hospital yesterday for these scans. The official diagnosis is this pelvic contusion. Team USA says they are taking it day by day, trying to work with him to see if they can get him up to 100% on Saturday. All eyes are going to be on this game to see if he takes the field.
Megan, the final round of group stage matches continues today. What games should we be watching out for?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got a lot of things to look out for. First of all, France, favored to win this tournament, is going to be taking on Tunisia. One of the big games to look out for, I would say, is Argentina versus Poland. Of course, this is Lionel Messi's team, Argentina. Argentina also one of the powerhouses in soccer, but lost to Saudi Arabia in the beginning of this tournament. And we are going to be looking at Lionel Messi as he tries to get his first World Cup title. This is a player who's the best in the world, but doesn't have a World Cup title. So this should be an easy game for Argentina. But like I said, we've seen them lose to Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest upsets in World Cup history. So these should be some interesting games to watch tonight, guys.
All right, exciting stuff. Go Team USA. Megan, thank you so much.
Nothing seems to be easy at the World Cup right now. All right, 'tis the season for inflation. Millions of Americans are getting their homes and their pockets ready for the holidays this year. NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff has more on the rising cost of your Christmas trees.
You do not know how good it smells out here right now, but it might smell good. The price doesn't look so good for a lot of Americans. There's 25 to 30 million Christmas trees that are sold across the country, I guess, every single year. There are experts in this stuff. I am not one of them, but I've learned a lot overnight as I have scoured the streets of New York City for the best deals on Christmas trees. Farmers are hurting, consumers are hurting. Here's what you need to know.
With the holidays officially underway, many Americans will be getting into the spirit with the symbol of the season, a Christmas tree. Selecting a tree together, part of a family tradition for many.
There it is.
I kept checking, when can we go? When can we go? Yes, I'm excited.
At the Pine Valley Tree Farm in Maryland, the Underwood family has been planting and selling trees for over 7 decades.
This is the best time of the year for me because I get to see customers who have been coming here for 40, 50 years.
But like so many other things this year, inflation is impacting their pricing, and they have to pass it on to customers.
Fertilizer has doubled and tripled and quadrupled. Obviously, fuel costs have gone up tremendously. So that all affects your bottom line, as well as labor costs.
The Real Christmas Tree Board estimates prices are up between 5% and 15% this holiday season.
The retail price of a Christmas tree is going to vary widely by geographic location and, most importantly, how far you are from a major Christmas tree production area.
To get the best deal when selecting a tree, keep species in mind. Douglas firs and pine varieties are usually more affordable. Shop early in the season for the best selection. Compare prices and consider Cyber Week sales on an artificial tree to reuse year after year. Perhaps the #1 tip to save: don't buy too much tree.
Save room for several inches for the Christmas tree stand, and you can buy the tree that's the right size.
For everyone who celebrates the season, it's the Christmas spirit that brings people together.
And see how excited they are to be picking out their Christmas tree and how excited they are when they find that perfect tree for themselves.
And if you want to get crafty, I'm going to get a little crafty out here. There's a couple things that you can do. You can make a wood tree. You can make a metal tree. Tabletop fabric is another option. There are people who are very good at this. You do not want to ask me to do this. You could also rent a potted tree, supposedly. $150 for a 5 to 6 foot one. You can take that into consideration as well. Happy tree hunting, everybody.
All right, Jacob, thank you so much. You got yours?
Oh, yeah.
And
big one, too. 10 feet. It's
10 feet?
Yeah. I'm all about my Christmas
tree. You live in a palace.
We have high ceilings for a New York City apartment, for sure.
How do you decorate it that high?
A ladder.
Okay.
Yeah. And I actually don't have a star yet. So, it's just kind of like sticking up at the top. It would be a very nice tree.
That high up, you might need a real star.
Yeah,
All right.
I know. We actually didn't ask for that. We got it delivered because in New York, and they were like, instead of, 8 or 9, it's 10 feet.
All right.
Like, well, good thing we do luckily have high ceilings. One thing we do have.
Good for you. Happy Christmas in your place.
Thank you.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Stay with us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.